Because I forgot to wash a single test tube, the lab's new supervisor announced he was kicking me off a major federal grant project. During our lab meeting, he tore into me in front of everyone. "Chloe, don't think you're hot stuff just because you've published a few papers. The lab rules clearly state that all equipment must be washed the same day. You knew the rule and broke it, which makes it even worse. You can forget about ever touching this federal grant again." I didn't say a word. I just stood up, turned around, and walked out. Kick me out? Fine by me. The whole lab can just be shut down then. Dr. Warner was furious with my reaction. "Chloe, where do you think you're going? Get back here. You need to write a formal apology and read it aloud to everyone at the next meeting." I turned to look at his face, which was twisted with anger, and replied calmly, "Sure, no problem." The room went silent. All the senior members of the lab stared at me in disbelief. Dr. Warner just snorted and stormed out of the lab. A few minutes later, a notification popped up in the main lab group chat. PhD student Chloe Lee has shown a lax attitude toward her work and has seriously violated lab protocols. She will conduct a public self-criticism today at 3 p.m. in conference room A301 to rectify this behavior. The air in the room felt like it had frozen solid. My friend Sarah, sitting next to me, secretly nudged my phone under the table and sent me a DM. "Chloe, don't be stubborn. Just apologize to Dr. Warner. This is a federal grant. It could affect your graduation." I shook my head. It was pointless. He was the new guy in charge and needed to assert his authority, to bring in his own people. He'd been wanting to give my PhD project to one of the students he brought with him for a while now. As for this federal grant, I had already completed the most difficult, groundbreaking phase. The data was flawless. Dr. Warner probably thought I was in his way, and was afraid I'd get too much credit. This was just the excuse he needed. I sent Sarah a "don't worry" emoji, then switched screens and began organizing backups of all my experimental data, along with years of original records and analysis workflows. I encrypted everything, compressed it, and uploaded it to my personal cloud drive. Then I permanently deleted all the local copies. Only after all that was done did I open a new document and start writing my apology. At one point, Dr. Warner intentionally strolled by. When he saw I was actually writing the apology, he couldn't stop a smug smile from spreading across his face. At 3 p.m., conference room A301 was packed. Dr. Warner stood at the front, his expression all business. "Let me emphasize this again. A lab has rules. This isn't your dorm room. Some people seem to think the regulations posted on the wall are just for decoration. Don't think you can get special treatment just because Professor Lee personally recruited you. So what if your technique is good and you get data fast? You can't even follow basic discipline. Chloe Lee, come up and deliver your apology. Let everyone hear it as a warning." I stood up and pulled out the apology I had so carefully prepared. "I, Chloe Lee, have made an unforgivable mistake today. I never should have missed washing that one test tube. From this day forward, I will strictly follow every single lab regulation and never make this mistake again. Honestly, I'm just an ordinary student. If Dr. Warner doesn't want me touching a project, I definitely won't touch it. As long as you understand." Dr. Warner cut me off, apparently very satisfied with my confession, and immediately made an announcement. Given Chloe Lee's repeated transgressions and negative attitude, the core project team has decided to officially remove her from the National Grant Project, effective immediately. All of her previous research tasks and data will be transferred to our new postdoctoral researcher, Dr. Evans, who will be taking over. The room was silent. The man next to Dr. Warner, a postdoc with gold-rimmed glasses who had been quiet the whole time, nodded and gave the crowd a reserved smile. I glanced at Sarah. Her eyes were filled with nothing but helpless shock. Finally, Dr. Warner added one last thing. "Chloe, after this meeting, I want you to immediately organize all your original experimental records and raw data related to this project and hand them over to Dr. Evans." No di less. I agreed with unusual enthusiasm, having already copied the prepared PowerPoint to the conference room's public computer. "It's all here, Dr. Warner. If you people can actually understand any of this data and continue the work, I'll admit defeat." Seeing how cooperative I was, A flicker of doubt crossed Dr. Warner's eyes. But after carefully checking the file list and confirming the huge number of well-organized files, his expression softened. Dr. Evans was even more self-satisfied. As soon as the meeting ended, he walked over and tapped on my lab bench. "Chloe, I'll need you to clear out your bench and personal locker. Also, please go over the checklist for the shared equipment and reagents. Don't hold up my work with Dr. Warner." I knew exactly what Dr. Evans was after. He didn't care about my bench, he cared about the brand new equipment on it. "Chloe, hurry it up. Lab space is tight, and Dr. Evans is eager to get started on his new project." Dr. Warner chimed in, playing the armchair general. I slowly closed an instrument case without looking up. "Dr. Warner, Dr. Evans, this is a lot of stuff. It's going to take me a while to pack everything. How about tomorrow? I'll definitely have it all cleared out by then, so I won't stand in the way of Dr. Evans's grand plans." Dr. Evans pushed his gold-rimmed glasses up his nose. Since I'd agreed to be out by tomorrow, he didn't argue. He just gave a curt nod and left with Dr. Warner. Without the crushing weight of that federal grant, a huge burden was lifted from my shoulders. The core data and experiments for my dissertation were already finished anyway. All that was left was some polishing and writing. And now I was completely free. The next afternoon, I efficiently packed the last of my personal belongings into boxes and took them back to my dorm. Once I was done, I took out my phone and bought a ticket to a dolphin show I'd been dying to see but never had time for. Sitting in the stadium, I watched the trainer and dolphins work together in perfect sync. Surrounded by the joyful cheers of children, I felt a pure sense of relaxation for the first time in a long while. However, the lab's group chat was not nearly as calm. That evening, my phone started buzzing nonstop. I opened it to see that in the new project group chat, Dr. Evans was already laying down the law. "At everyone. Starting tomorrow, each of you will submit a daily progress report detailing your experimental steps, reagents used, and preliminary results. Email it to me before 10 p.m. every night. Each person must complete at least 3 full experimental cycles per week. The compiled data must be submitted to me for review by Sunday night. Use of all lab equipment must be requested from me 1 day in advance. No one is to use the major instruments without my permission." A private message from Sarah immediately followed, her frustration palpable. Screenshot: "Chloe, look at this. He really thinks he's the king of the world. He delegates all the work while he just wanders around the lab, pointing fingers and spouting a bunch of hot air that's absolutely no help at all. And today he told me to wash a pile of beakers that had been sitting there for days. Why should I have to do that?" I could almost picture Sarah fuming on the other side of the screen. "Sarah, calm down. If it's not your job, just say no. You don't have to listen to him. You have your own experiments to worry about." She was typing for a long time before she sent another message. "Sigh, I'm just so angry for you. Chloe, Dr. Warner is so blatantly targeting you and stealing your project. Are you really not going to do anything? Should we tell Professor Lee?" I stared at her message and slowly typed my reply. "Not yet. Professor Lee is still at an important academic conference abroad. There's no need to bother him with this small stuff right now." When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the gap in my curtains. For the first time, I didn't bolt for the lab at 7 a.m. sharp. I slowly poured myself a glass of milk. My phone screen lit up with a text from Sarah. "Chloe, Dr. Warner was in the lab first thing this morning, making all these pointed remarks. He was saying how some people show their true colors once they're kicked off a project. Lazy, no discipline, none of the diligence a researcher should have. He practically read out your social security number." I took a sip of milk and replied, "Let him talk. Just ignore it." Then I turned off my phone, ready to go back to sleep. But I wasn't asleep for long before my phone rang, loud and shrill. I groggily answered it, and Dr. Warner's furious voice came through the line. "Chloe Lee, where is the equipment from your bench? The centrifuge, the PCR machine, and that micromanipulation setup. Where did they go? I've turned this lab upside down and can't find them." I rubbed my eyes. "Dr. Warner, if the equipment is missing, why is your first thought to call me?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by even greater fury. "Who else could it be? You were the last one to leave yesterday. If you didn't do something, did the instruments just grow legs and walk away? Dr. Warner, I said slowly sitting up, if things are missing, you should probably check the lab's usage logs and purchasing records first, or ask the other students if they borrowed them. Calling a student who was kicked off the project first thing in the morning to hurl accusations, isn't that a little inappropriate? My unhurried, almost innocent tone completely set him off. Don't give me that. Chloe Lee, I now have serious reason to suspect that you, disgruntled about being removed from the project, have intentionally damaged or even stolen lab property. I'm telling you, you get over here right now and explain yourself. I let out a small laugh. Dr. Warner, that's a very serious accusation. It's not right to say things like that without any proof, is it? No proof. You being the prime suspect is all the proof I need. I'm giving you 10 minutes. If you don't show up, don't blame me for taking drastic measures. I'm calling the police. You just wait. Dr. Warner was practically screaming before he slammed down the phone, leaving only a dial tone. I put down my phone, yawned, and rolled over to go back to sleep. Unexpectedly, about 10 minutes later, a frantic call came from Sarah. Her voice was hushed and filled with anxiety. Chloe, this is bad. Dr. Warner, he actually called the police to the lab. You should probably get over here, quick. I didn't rush. I calmly went out for breakfast, then slowly made my way toward the lab. My phone was vibrating nonstop in my pocket. I didn't need to look to know it was Dr. Warner. By the time I ambled up to the department building, Sarah was already waiting, practically bouncing with anxiety. She rushed over as soon as she saw me. Chloe, you're finally here. Dr. Warner is losing his mind upstairs, and the police are still there. You just be careful, okay? Don't push back too hard. I gave her an okay sign and walked up the stairs, completely relaxed. As expected, the atmosphere in the lab was tense. Dr. Warner was pacing anxiously around the room, with 2 uniformed police officers standing to one side. The other lab members had their heads down, pretending to be busy, afraid to even breathe too loudly. The moment Dr. Warner saw me, his eyes turned red and he lunged forward. Chloe Lee, look at your lab bench. It's completely empty. Where is the equipment? What did you do with the equipment? He spun around to face the police, his voice sharp. Officers, it was her. Yesterday, when no one was looking, she stole all of the lab's valuable equipment. I checked the surveillance footage. It clearly shows her carrying boxes out. The evidence is conclusive. One of the officers looked at me, his tone serious. Miss, is what this professor is saying true? Did you take the lab's equipment? I nodded. Yes, I'm the one who took it. Dr. Warner immediately acted as if he'd caught me red-handed, his voice trembling with excitement. Officers, did you hear that? She admitted it. This is theft. Blatant theft. Arrest her. Sarah, panicking on the sidelines, quickly interjected. Dr. Warner, officers, could there be some kind of misunderstanding? Chloe isn't that kind of person. We're all students in the same lab. How can you call it theft? Dr. Warner cut her off abruptly, a triumphant smirk on his face. A misunderstanding? What misunderstanding could there be? The surveillance footage is crystal clear. I've already found the invoices for all the equipment. The total value is over 150,000. That's grand larceny. It's enough to send her to prison. He turned to me, his eyes filled with malicious glee. Chloe Lee, are you scared now? Well, it's too late. But considering our professor-student relationship, I suppose I could give you a chance. I let out a cold laugh. Oh really? Dr. Warner, according to you, what do I have to do to avoid going to jail? Thinking I had finally caved, Dr. Warner lifted his chin even higher. Right now, in front of everyone and these officers, you will get on your knees, apologize to me, and promise to behave from now on. Then you will bring back every piece of equipment, completely untouched. If you do that, I might consider not pressing charges. Even the police officers standing by were stunned by his demand. I tilted my head. And why would I do that? Because you stole public property from this lab. Dr. Warner roared. I took a step forward, looked him straight in the eye, and said word by word, "Who told you I took public property?" Dr. Warner looked like he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world, and the muscles in his face started to twitch. You didn't steal it? Don't tell me you bought all this equipment yourself? Chloe Lee, you're a student. Where would you get $150,000 to buy all this? Seeing his frantic expression, I raised an eyebrow. Dr. Warner, didn't you say you already pulled up all the purchase records and invoices? Why didn't you take a closer look at the name in the payer column? Dr. Warner froze. He scrambled to look down, frantically flipping through the stack of papers he was holding as evidence. His eyes were glued to the payer information, and his face turned visibly pale. But he still tried to bluff, his voice loud but weak. This doesn't prove anything. Maybe Professor Lee gave you the money privately, and had you make the payment. Yes, that must be it. I couldn't help it, I burst out laughing. Dr. Warner, you've been in our lab for a while now. Are you really not familiar with our reimbursement and equipment procurement procedures? Every single expense goes through the university's official accounts. When has a lowly PhD student like me ever had to front over $100,000 and then wait for a professor to pay me back personally? If Professor Lee actually did that, the auditors would have been all over him. Dr. Warner was speechless, but he wasn't ready to give up. You have no proof. If you say you bought it, show us the evidence. Where are the payment records? Fine. You want to see? I'll show you. I took out my phone, expertly pulled up my transaction history, and shoved the screen right in his face before turning to the officers. Officers, please take a look as well. My last 3 years of bank statements are all here. Could you please check if there are any large transfers from Professor Lee or the university that match the cost of the equipment? The records on the screen were perfectly clear. The large deposits had nothing to do with the university or any professors. And the large withdrawals perfectly matched the dates and amounts on the purchase contracts and invoices for the missing equipment. Dr. Warner's face turned completely ashen. I put my phone away and glanced at his lab bench. Oh, by the way, Dr. Warner, that 8-channel pipette you were just using? I think I bought that one too. If you're not comfortable using it, maybe you should give it back? Dr. Warner's face instantly turned a ghastly shade of purple. The police officers standing by saw what was happening, and the situation couldn't have been clearer. Since this was all a misunderstanding and the equipment is the student's own legally purchased property, it doesn't constitute theft. We'll be leaving now. I nodded, then put on a perfectly timed expression of confusion. Wait a minute, officers. Dr. Warner, without verifying the facts, insisted I was a thief and even wasted your time by calling you both here. Wouldn't that be considered slander and defamation? When Dr. Warner heard that, he snapped his head up and looked at the police in terror. I paused, watching his nervous reaction, and said slowly, how about this? Right now, in front of everyone and the officers, you get on your knees and apologize for wrongly accusing me. If you do that, I'll let this go. Dr. Warner's eyes went wide, and he shakily pointed a finger at me. You. I couldn't help but laugh again, and waved my hand dismissively. Oh, Dr. Warner, look how scared you are. I'm just kidding. We're professor and student after all. Why would I ever make you kneel and apologize to me? What kind of monster would that make me? My words left Dr. Warner, so choked up he could barely breathe. His chest heaved, and it took him a long moment to force out a few words through gritted teeth. You, Chloe Lee. You just wait. After the police left that day, Dr. Warner began to hold a serious grudge against me. He started trying to make my life difficult in all sorts of petty, almost laughable ways. First, he secretly had the administrative staff change the key code for the lab's main door, and conveniently forgot to tell me. I stood outside with my breakfast, punching in the old code for ages, until a student from the lab next door took pity on me and secretly told me the new one. Next, he casually mentioned during a lab meeting that internal lab communications would now be distributed on a need-to-know basis. The subtext was clear. He was telling the others not to share anything with me. I couldn't be bothered to care about any of it. At this point, I was basically just a freeloader in the lab. I came in on time, left on time, and did absolutely no work while I was there. I'd just sit at my old bench, read some papers, and soak up the sun coming through the window. Occasionally, I'd run an errand for one of my lab mates to stay on their good side. My days were more relaxed than Dr. Warner's, the supposed project leader. One afternoon, I was wearing headphones, listening to music and enjoying the rare afternoon sun. I was one step away from bringing in a lounge chair. Across the room, Dr. Evans was directing a few of the master's students as they continued to struggle with the federal grant project. After a flurry of panicked activity, one of the younger students timidly raised her hand. Dr. Evans, it looks like we're out of the Star Cell 3 specific culture medium. Dr. Evans frowned, but before he could speak, Dr. Warner rushed over. If you're out, then buy more. Do I have to teach you that? The experiment can't just stop. Another PhD student in charge of supplies quickly checked the computer, then turned the screen toward Dr. Warner with an awkward expression. Dr. Warner, this is a custom medium. We have to order it from a specific biotech company, and their quote, well, take a look. Dr. Warner impatiently leaned over to look at the quote, and his eyes instantly bulged. He sucked in a sharp breath, his voice cracking. How much? That expensive? Are they robbing us? How did we get it before? His shouting drew the attention of the entire lab. Dr. Evans pushed up his glasses, looking embarrassed. He lowered his voice, forcing the words out through his teeth. Dr. Warner, before, Chloe was basically in charge of this entire project. The procurement channels and the discount agreement we had with them, she's probably the only one who knows the details. Dr. Warner's face instantly turned hideous. He stiffly turned his head, his eyes scanning the lab before finally landing on me, lounging in my chair. He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself, before walking over to me. I could tell he was trying to make his tone sound normal, but that old demanding edge still came through. Chloe, when you were in charge of the project, you were the one who handled the procurement for this medium, right? I took off one headphone and blinked. Yeah, what about it? All right then, he said, his tone immediately hardening. Contact them right away and place a rush order for another batch, just like before. The experiment needs it urgently. I looked at his entitled expression and almost laughed out loud. And why would I do that, Dr. Warner? I'm not on the project team, and I don't have access to the budget. On what authority would I place an order? My pushback left him speechless, and his face flushed red again. Chloe Lee, this is a federal grant project. If you delay progress and mess this up, can you take responsibility for that? I sneered, completely immune to his threats. Dr. Warner, don't try to pin that on me. The project leaders are, in black and white, you and Dr. Evans. If the sky falls, you two tall guys will be there to hold it up. What does any of this have to do with a freeloader like me? Responsibility? I can't afford that. You. Dr. Warner was so angry his finger was shaking. Fine. Chloe Lee, you're deliberately slacking off and refusing to cooperate with a major project. I'm going to tell Professor Lee. We'll see how you manage to graduate then. His childishness was so amusing I just leaned back and crossed my legs. Go ahead, Dr. Warner. Please go run and tell on me. TSK. I never would have thought a man your age would still have telling the teacher as his first instinct. Haven't you been weaned yet? A few suppressed snickers rippled through the lab. Dr. Warner's face turned a deep shade of purple. He pointed at me, sputtering you for a while before finally stomping his foot and throwing out the same old tired threat. Chloe Lee, you just wait. Despite Dr. Warner's tough act, I knew he was completely helpless when it came to ordering that ridiculously expensive culture medium. The project's funding was more than enough to cover it, but his penny pinching made it clear he was reluctant to spend a large sum on actual research materials. It was as if the money was coming out of his own pocket. I did a quick mental calculation. Professor Lee should be back in the country soon. Sure enough, a notification soon appeared in the main lab group chat. Dr. Warner had arranged a welcome-back dinner for Professor Lee and specifically mentioned everyone. He emphasized that attendance is mandatory, no exceptions. I knew he was singling me out, planning to put me on trial in front of everyone at the dinner. But what he didn't know was that I had been waiting for this day for a long time. At the dinner, the private room was buzzing with excitement. Dr. Warner was all smiles, bustling around to seat Professor Lee at the head of the table before taking the seat beside him. After a few rounds of drinks, Dr. Warner stood up, raised his glass, and gave a long-winded speech welcoming Professor Lee back and praising the lab's fruitful results. Then his tone shifted. Professor Lee, while you were away, things in the lab were generally good, but there were a few discordant notes. Take Chloe, for example. I think the pressure may have gotten to her. She repeatedly violated lab regulations, and despite my repeated attempts to counsel her, she didn't listen. For the sake of the project's integrity, I had no choice but to temporarily ask her to step away from the project team to rest. Just as I expected, he was pointing the finger at me. He sighed, as if deeply pained. But I never imagined Chloe would react with such resentment. Not only did she refuse to cooperate with the transition, but she also wouldn't even let the team borrow some of the equipment registered under her name in an emergency. And this time with the urgent need for critical materials. Sigh, I just never thought a student like Chloe could have such a lack of team spirit. As he spoke, he kept glancing at Professor Lee's face. Professor Lee listened, his brow furrowing deeper and his expression growing darker. Dr. Warner was secretly pleased, thinking he had set the stage perfectly. Suddenly, with a loud bang, Professor Lee slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. Dr. Warner assumed Professor Lee was finally about to lay into me, and could barely contain his triumphant expression. But to his shock, Professor Lee turned his head, glared at him, and pointed his finger right at Dr. Warner. You're the one who's being absurd. The smile on Dr. Warner's face froze instantly. He was completely stunned, stammering, Professor Lee, shouldn't you be reprimanding Chloe? I am talking about you. Dr. Warner. Professor Lee was so angry his voice rose an octave. This is a federal grant project. Do you think you can just swap out the principal investigator whenever you feel like it? Who gave you that authority? You kicked out a core team member at the most critical stage of the research. What were you thinking? Dr. Warner was utterly dumbfounded. He stood there with his mouth open, unable to speak, his face alternating between red and white. Professor Lee was still fuming. And another thing. Apologize to Chloe right now. AP apologize? For what? Dr. Warner cried out, a mix of shock and indignation on his face. He was filled with humiliation and defiance. Watching this farce unfold, I couldn't help but smile. I put down my chopsticks and slowly turned to Dr. Warner. Dr. Warner, does the name Kinley sound familiar to you? Dr. Warner paused, trying to place the name. A few seconds later, it hit him. Kinley, isn't he the owner of that biotech company that makes the Star Cell 3 medium and all those other key reagents? The one with the non-negotiable prices. Well, your memory's not bad, Dr. Warner. I smiled and delivered the final, fatal blow. He's my dad. Dr. Warner looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. He froze on the spot. The color drained from his face, leaving it a ghastly white. At that moment, Professor Lee coolly interjected. Dr. Warner, why do you think I went against everyone's advice and entrusted such an important national project to a second-year PhD student? Was it just because Chloe has precise technique and a quick mind? The more critical reason is that her family's company was willing to supply us with the most essential and expensive custom media and reagents for this project, long-term, in unlimited quantities and at cost, or even below cost, as a research contribution. Without that, this project would have struggled to even get off the ground. Did you really think your meager budget could handle the market prices for those materials? Dr. Warner completely fell apart. His body swayed, and he nearly collapsed. I looked at his ashen face, then stood up and glanced around at the silent junior students. Finally, I turned to Professor Lee, my gaze firm. Professor, there's something the other students might be afraid to say, so I'll say it for them. During my observations over the past few weeks, I've noticed that Dr. Warner has been using his position as project manager to force the junior students to do a significant amount of personal work for him. This includes but is not limited to buying him breakfast, picking up his packages, and chauffeuring his elementary school-aged child to and from school. It even includes going to his house on weekends to walk his dog and clean his house. He also used the pretense of caring for their academic progress to demand that students go to his house on weekends to tutor his child for free, which severely cut into their research and personal time. Hearing this, Professor Lee became enraged and whipped his head toward Dr. Warner. Dr. Warner, is what Chloe is saying true? Dr. Warner was still trying to fight it, his lips trembling. No, that's not, she's lying. However, the junior students, who had long had enough, exchanged glances. Finally mustering their courage, they began to stand up, one by one. Professor Lee, what Chloe said is all true. Dr. Warner did make me pick up his kid more than 10 times. I had to walk his dog for 3 months. He made us go to his house every weekend to tutor his kid in math and English. He said he wouldn't sign off on our work if we didn't. The evidence was overwhelming, with witnesses to back it up. Dr. Warner's face was ashen. He slumped into his chair, completely defeated. Professor Lee pointed at him furiously. My lab has no place for a professor who exploits his students. Starting tomorrow, you can pack your things and get out. Professor Lee's words were a final verdict, sentencing Dr. Warner's academic career to death. Dr. Warner was sweating profusely. Seeing his reputation about to be ruined, he suddenly seemed to remember something in his desperation. He shot his head up, his eyes filled with a desperate hope. Professor Lee, you can't just listen to her side of the story. Even if my management style was a bit improper, the project's results are real. Dr. Evans and I have already made a breakthrough. The data is all organized, and we even have a draft of the paper. He grabbed the equally pale Dr. Evans and urged him on. Evans, quick. Show Professor Lee the PowerPoint you prepared. Let him see what we've accomplished. Dr. Evans was shoved forward. He fumbled to open his laptop and connect it to the room's projector. His hands were shaking so badly that his forehead was covered in cold sweat. The screen lit up, displaying the paper's title and abstract. It was, of course, based on the mountain of data I had completed earlier. Sarah was so angry her face turned red. She gripped my arm tightly under the table and whispered, Chloe, they're shameless. That's all your hard work. Are they just going to steal it like this? What are we going to do? I gently patted her hand and gave her a reassuring look. It's okay, Sarah. Don't worry. Dr. Evans stood by the projector, stammering through his presentation, boasting about the quality of the data and the novelty of the analysis. Dr. Warner chimed in from time to time, desperately trying to prove their value. Professor Lee stood with his arms crossed, his face still grim, but he didn't interrupt. When Dr. Evans reached the key data analysis section and was about to display the core figures, he took a deep breath. Professor Lee, the figures might be hard to see on the projector, so I'll just print out a PDF of the paper for you to review. With that, he clicked the Export to PDF button. All eyes were on the projector screen. The progress bar filled up in an instant. But in the next second, every spot where a chart or figure should have been was replaced by a white image with large, bold, black text. It clearly read, Original Data Analysis by Chloe Lee. Research Theft by Dr. Evans. Dr. Warner. Shameful. The entire room fell utterly silent. The cold light from the projector illuminated Dr. Evans's face, which had instantly lost all its color. His finger was still frozen on the mouse, making him look like a comical puppet. Someone couldn't hold it in any longer and let out a snort, which seemed to light a fuse. The room instantly filled with suppressed laughter and murmurs. Dr. Warner stared at the digital wanted poster on the screen in disbelief, then whipped his head around to look at the ashen-faced Dr. Evans, and finally glared at me, incredulous. His lips trembled, but he couldn't form a single word. It was social death. Right here, right now? Only then did I leisurely pick up a napkin to wipe my mouth and speak calmly. Oh, I forgot to mention. I logged into the lab's data analysis platform the other day. I happened to see Dr. Evans's masterpiece and couldn't help but notice he seemed to be having a little trouble with data permissions and embedded code. I looked at the nearly fainting Dr. Evans and the teetering Dr. Warner, and smiled. It seems some people aren't just morally bankrupt, their tech skills are garbage too. With that level of ability, you really thought you could pass this off as your own and steal all the credit? Professor Lee watched this dramatic scene unfold, and when he looked back at me, his eyes were filled with a complex mix of emotions. But mostly, it was relief and resolve. He finally understood the whole story. He shot to his feet, pointed at the door, and roared at Dr. Warner and Dr. Evans. Get out! My lab, and this entire university, has no place for academic scum like you. Dr. Warner, You can wait for the university's official notice. Dr. Evans, your postdoctoral contract is terminated." Amid a chorus of contempt and satisfaction, Dr. Warner and Dr. Evans, their faces pale as death, practically scrambled out of the room. Their welcome back dinner had turned into their farewell party. The federal grant project, after all its twists and turns, finally came back to me. Without all the toxic interference, the project progressed with incredible speed. In the end, I completed it successfully and delivered a stellar final report. Just before graduation, Sarah came over to me conspiratorially to share the latest news. "Chloe, did you hear? It's not over for Dr. Warner." Several of the students he exploited filed a joint complaint against him with the university president's office. "I heard the administration is taking it very seriously and has formed an investigation committee. They're not just looking into his abuse of students, but also his use of grant funds. Apparently, he was falsifying expense reports and embezzling a ton of the school's research money for personal use. If they can prove it, getting fired will be the least of his worries. He might even go to jail." As I listened, I wasn't surprised. I just replied calmly, "What goes around comes around. He brought this all on himself. He has no one else to blame." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Exactly. He deserves it." Graduation day was bright and sunny. I was in my cap and gown, and as soon as I walked out of the auditorium, I was surrounded by a crowd of junior lab members. They were all holding bouquets of flowers, laughingly shoving them into my arms. "Chloe, congratulations on graduating." "Thank you so much, Chloe. If you hadn't been willing to lend us your equipment, we never would have gotten our experimental data so smoothly." "Yeah, and that time you stood up for us. If it weren't for you, we'd probably still be doing free labor for Dr. Warner. You're the best, Chloe." Looking at their sincere, energetic faces, my heart felt warm. Just saying thank you isn't enough. You all have to carry on our lab's glorious traditions of standing up for what's right and sharing equipment to help each other out. You hear me? And don't let any more clowns or toxic people into our lab. The students all laughed and shouted in unison, "We know, Chloe." Mission accepted. I held the heavy bouquets of flowers and looked at the young faces who would soon be the future of the lab. The sun shone down on all of us, warm and bright. I knew that the murkiness had been cleared away and the path forward was clear. A beautiful future, filled with hope and the pure ideals of scientific research, was waiting for us. Just then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I freed a hand to answer it, and my father's cheerful voice came through. "Honey, is the graduation ceremony over? So, are you finally satisfied? Ready to settle down and come back to take over your old man's business? Our culture medium empire is waiting for its crown princess to take the throne." Listening to my dad's half-joking complaint, I couldn't help but laugh. "In your dreams, Dad. I just submitted my application. I've already received a full-ride PhD offer from MIT. Your empire is going to have to hold on for a few more years on its own." "What? More school? You kids these days." My dad paused on the other end of the line, then let out an exaggerated sigh. "Fine, fine, go study. I knew it. My fate in this life is just to cultivate talent for the academic world. Go on, go on. Just remember to come home and visit your old dad sometimes." After hanging up, I looked at the vast blue sky in the distance, a smile spreading across my face. The road ahead was still long, but every step was leading me toward a brilliant future of my own choosing.